Have you ever caught yourself thinking, I should be over this by now? Maybe your divorce was 6 months ago. Maybe it was 2 years ago. Maybe it's been 10 years. And every once in a while, something still catches you off guard. A song comes on the radio. You see an old family photo. Your children leave to spend the holidays with your ex. You hear they've started dating someone new. And suddenly, all of those emotions come rushing back. And in that moment, it's easy to think something must be wrong with you, that you should be over this by now, that somehow you failed at healing. But what if I told you one of the biggest lies people believe after divorce is that healing should follow a straight line? Friend, that's just not true. Healing is not linear, and it certainly isn't a race. Today, we're going to talk about the stages of divorce grief, what healing often looks like over time, and why your journey may be completely normal, even if it doesn't look like someone else's. Also, I will share what I believe is the final stage of healing that almost no one talks about. And it's the stage where real joy begins to return. So stay with me until the end because understanding that final stage could completely change the way you view your future. Hey, y'all, welcome back to Find the Joy with Jenn. I'm Jenn Zingmark, your Christian life and divorce coach. And if this is your first time here, I'm so glad you found me. Every week, we talk about healing after separation and divorce, strengthening our faith in Jesus Christ, and learning how to create a joyful life even when life does not turn out the way we planned. If you haven't already, I would love for you to subscribe to the podcast or my YouTube channel so you never miss a new episode. And if today's message blesses you, would you please take a minute and leave a review or share it with someone who needs a little hope today? You never know how one conversation can change someone's life. Thanks for being here, friend. One of the questions I hear more than almost anything else is, Jenn, how long is this going to hurt? And I wish I could give everyone the same answer. I wish I could say it's 6 months or 1 year or 18 months, and then suddenly everything feels normal again. But healing doesn't work that way because divorce isn't just one loss. It is actually dozens of losses happening all at once. You lose your spouse, but you also lose the future you imagined together. You lose those routines that felt so familiar. You may lose your financial security, friendships, family traditions, even your identity as a wife or husband, your confidence, and for many people, even part of their church community. And if you have children, you may also grieve losing those daily moments with them, holidays together, bedtime routines, family vacations, and all those little experiences you imagined that you would be sharing with someone else. No wonder divorce feels overwhelming. You're not grieving one thing, you're grieving an entire life that no longer exists. And that's why I don't like putting people into neat little boxes. Yes, the 5 stages of grief are incredibly helpful, but they don't always happen in perfect order. And you don't finish one stage and permanently move into the next one. Healing is much more like climbing a mountain. Some days you feel like you've made incredible progress, but other days you slip backwards and wonder if you've learned anything at all. But slipping is not the same thing as starting over. And as long as you continue to move towards our Savior Jesus Christ and choose healing, you are making progress, my friend. That is why the 5 stages of grief can be so helpful. These stages of grief were originally developed to describe grief after death, but they can also help us understand many of the emotions that we experience after divorce. But I want to make something very clear before we dive in. These stages are not staircases. You don't complete one and then permanently move into the next one. Healing is much more like an ocean. Sometimes the waves are gentle, and other days they just crash over you unexpectedly. You may feel acceptance one day and anger the next. That does not mean you're moving backwards. It simply means that you're human, my friend. So let's dive in. The first stage is denial. Denial does not necessarily mean you're refusing to believe that divorce is happening or has happened. It often sounds more like, this can't really be my life. Your mind struggles to accept the reality of what has happened because it's trying to protect you from being emotionally overwhelmed. You may continue hoping your spouse will change their mind. You may replay conversations over and over, searching for some clue that this isn't really the end. For some people, denial even begins before the divorce, especially if problems have existed for many years, but they've convinced themselves things will eventually get better. Friend, if you're here, give yourself so much grace. Denial is your brain's way of slowly helping you absorb an incredibly painful reality. For many people, those first few months after separation or divorce are just pure survival. Whether you saw it coming or you were completely blindsided, your brain and body often respond as though you have experienced a major trauma because you actually have. Research tells us that divorce is one of life's most stressful experiences. Your nervous system shifts into survival mode. You may have trouble sleeping. You may even lose your appetite or find yourself eating constantly. Your thoughts can race. You replay conversations over and over. You wake up thinking about the divorce. You go to bed thinking about it again. Your body is flooded with stress hormones, and even simple decisions can feel exhausting. If this is where you are, I want you to hear me clearly. There is nothing wrong with you. Your brain is trying to protect you. It sees the loss of your marriage as a threat to your emotional safety, and it responds exactly the way God designed it to respond during a crisis. This isn't the season to expect yourself to have everything figured out. This is the season to just survive, breathe, pray, lean on people who love you, and to only make the decisions that are absolutely necessary to be made. Give yourself permission to survive before you expect to thrive. As the initial shock wears off, many people enter the second stage of grief, anger. Now, anger often gets a bad reputation, especially in Christian circles. We sometimes believe feeling angry means we're doing something wrong, but anger itself is not a problem. Anger is simply an emotion. It is information, as I like to say. It tells us something matters deeply to us. And after divorce, anger may sound like this: how could they do this? Why wasn't I enough? Why did I lose everything? Why does it seem like they're moving on while I'm still picking up all of the pieces? You may replay these questions or conversations over and over in your mind and imagine what you wish you had said, or feel consumed with proving your side of the story. Friend, there is a difference between feeling anger and living there. Healthy anger acknowledges the hurt and eventually moves towards healing. Unhealthy anger keeps us chained to that person who hurt us. One of the greatest gifts you can give yourself is refusing to let your ex continue to live rent free in your mind. Now, forgiveness does not excuse what happened. It doesn't remove accountability, but it does release you from carrying the weight of bitterness everywhere you go. That doesn't happen overnight. It is a process. Sometimes it is a decision that you'll have to make over and over again. But every step towards forgiveness is really a step towards your own freedom. Somewhere along the way, many people find themselves in the next stage, bargaining. This is stage 3. This is where our mind begins trying to rewrite the past. If only I had been more patient. If only I had noticed sooner. If only we had gone to counseling. If only they had changed. If only God would fix this. In this stage, we become convinced that if we can just figure out exactly what went wrong, maybe we can somehow erase the pain. I know what this feels like. I spent plenty of time in this stage myself. I replayed conversations. I questioned every decision. I wondered if there was something I could have done differently. Looking back now, I realized those questions weren't really helping me heal. They were helping me stay connected to a story that had already ended. There is certainly value in honestly evaluating your marriage and learning from your mistakes. In fact, I encourage everyone I coach with to do exactly that. We spend time learning those lessons and taking all the good that you can learn from that marriage that has ended, but also leaving behind the bad. There is a difference between learning from the past and living in the past. One leads to growth. The other keeps us emotionally stuck. This is a very important difference, my friends. The fourth stage is depression. And this is often where people become frightened. This is a stage where the reality of the divorce settles in. The paperwork is signed, friends have moved on, life gets quiet. You may feel exhausted, lonely, unmotivated, and wonder if you will ever feel joy again. Let me pause here and say something important. Feeling sadness after divorce is normal. It is part of the process. If those feelings become persistent, severe, or begin interfering with your ability to function or leave you feeling hopeless for long extended periods, please reach out to a trusted therapist, physician, or mental health professional. There is tremendous strength in asking for help. And God often answers our prayers through other people. I remember during my own divorce, there were many moments when I couldn't imagine laughing again. I couldn't picture myself trusting again or believing that God still had a beautiful future in store for me. Maybe that's where you are today. And if it is, please borrow my hope until you can find your own, because I promise you, the way you feel today is not how you will feel forever. Finally, we come to acceptance. I think this is one of the most misunderstood stages of all. Acceptance does not mean you're happy that your divorce happened. It doesn't mean that the betrayal was okay. It doesn't mean you approve of everything that took place. Acceptance simply means you stop arguing with reality. You stop spending your emotional energy wishing the past were different, and you begin asking, Lord, what would you have me do today? Acceptance is choosing to live in the present instead of remaining trapped in the past. One of the biggest mistakes that I see people make is believing they should never revisit these stages once they've moved through them. But healing doesn't happen that way. You may feel completely at peace for weeks, and then the holidays arrive, or your child graduates, or your ex gets remarried, and suddenly that grief comes back up to the surface again. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you've encountered another layer of healing. Think about it like peeling an onion. Every layer brings you closer to the center. Healing often works the same way. So, how do you know if you're truly making progress? It's not because you never cry anymore. And it's not because you never think about your ex. Healing isn't measured by how quickly you recover. It's measured by how much peace begins replacing panic, by how often you choose forgiveness over resentment, by how much your trust in God grows. It's measured by whether you're becoming more like your Savior Jesus Christ through this experience instead of becoming consumed by bitterness because of it. One of my favorite scriptures is found in Isaiah chapter 41, verse 10. Fear not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God, and I will strengthen thee. Yea, I will help thee. I love this beautiful promise because God never says he'll avoid our heartbreak. He promises we won't walk through it alone. Friend, the Savior understands your grief perfectly. He knows what it feels like to be betrayed, abandoned, misunderstood, and rejected. Because of him, there is no pain that you carry that he cannot understand perfectly. This week, I want to challenge you to identify the stage that you find yourself in today, not to judge yourself, not to compare yourself to anyone else, just to notice it with compassion and then ask one simple question: Lord, what are you trying to teach me in this season? And write down whatever comes to your heart and mind. You may be surprised by how clearly the Lord speaks when you're not trying to rush the process. Next week, we're going to continue this conversation because understanding the stages of grief is only part of the story. I want to talk about something almost nobody prepares you for after divorce: why healing sometimes feels harder in year 2 than it did in year 1, and why so many people believe they're falling behind, and the biggest lie about healing that keeps people discouraged for years. If you've ever wondered why you're still hurting or whether you're behind anyone else, I don't want you to miss next week's episode. Friend, wherever you are today, remember this: your grief is not evidence that you have failed in any way. It is evidence that you have loved deeply. Your grief is not your destination. God has more for you than simply surviving. He wants your heart to heal. He wants you to strengthen your faith and to help you create a life filled with joy again. I promise. Trust in God. Lean into your faith. Until next time, remember this: your best days are not behind you. With your trust in God, your greatest healing is still ahead. Keep trusting His timing. Keep taking one faithful step at a time. And as always, keep finding the joy, my friend. I will help you find it. Bye, y'all.